Jake Sanders wasn't looking for trouble. After losing his wife to cancer 2 years ago, he'd worked long hours at the garage just to afford a quieter life for his son, Max. Ocala looked like the kind of place that promised peace. Polished driveways, trimmed hedges, American flags by every door. The horror brochure said community first. That was before he met Karen Rollins. She introduced herself with a plate of cookies and a clipboard. Her smile flickered like a faulty light bulb. "We take pride in keeping things uniform here," she said, eyes already scanning Jake's rusty pickup and the wind chime Max had hung on the porch. "We'll get you up to speed." Jake nodded politely. He wasn't the type to ruffle feathers. Max, however, had other plans. The boy had brains and no brakes, 12 years old, skinny as a rake, and always building things out of junk he found. He called it inventing. Jake called it clutter. But to Max, the backyard was his lab. That weekend, Max launched a homemade weather balloon using a trash bag, helium tank, and an old GoPro. It rose clean over the rooftops, wobbling like a drunken kite. Jake was impressed, until a man with a phone came storming down the sidewalk, filming. "HOA board," the man snapped. "This isn't permitted. That's an aerial hazard." Karen wasn't far behind. "We can't allow children to create potential disasters," she said sweetly, holding her phone sideways, recording Jake like he was a zoo animal. Jake lowered his voice. "It's a balloon, not a drone strike." Karen smiled wider. "It's still a violation." Max, standing behind his dad, whispered, "She smells like hairspray and rage." Jake chuckled. But that night, the first letter showed up. It wasn't mailed, just taped to his front door with blue painter's tape. It cited a list of infractions, unauthorized weather devices, unapproved wind chime, and improper fence edge color. At the bottom, someone had signed a single letter, K. The next few days, Max noticed things changing. His science kits, usually left untouched on the patio, were moved. A small camera had appeared in the common green belt, pointed toward their house. One morning, Max found his tow car open, scattered, as if someone had searched through it. Jake reported it to the horror. Karen assured him the security cameras caught nothing suspicious. "You know," she added, brushing a crumb from her blazer, "sometimes boys get into mischief. It's part of growing up." Jake started walking Max to the bus stop himself. The tension in the air was growing thicker than the pine pollen that blanketed the neighborhood each spring. It was Tuesday morning when Max didn't come home. Jake waited until 5, then 6, then panic took hold like a vice. He called the school. They said Max boarded the bus. He called neighbors. No one had seen him. Jake circled the block 3 times, then stormed toward the whole office across from the pole. Karen opened the door like she'd been expecting him. "I heard," she said calmly. "Kids can be so unpredictable." Maybe he ran off. Jake's stomach turned. "You think Max just wandered away? He's 12. He's got asthma. He doesn't wander." Karen placed a hand over her heart. "Oh, I'm sure he's just fine." Jake didn't respond. Something in her tone chilled him. As he turned away, an elderly voice called to him from a nearby bench. Mrs. Lopez, who spent most afternoons feeding birds in the park, waved him over with a trembling hand. "They told him there was a surprise," she whispered. "Said it was in the old shed by the tennis courts." Jake froze. "There's a shed back there?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Behind the hedge. It's usually locked. Nobody uses it anymore." Jake didn't ask questions. He sprinted. The shed stood half hidden behind a line of trimmed bushes, its paint peeling and padlocked. But the air smelled off, like scorched wires and smoke. And when he pressed his ear to the wood, he heard coughing. Then a scream. His son's voice. Jake didn't wait for backup. He rattled the door handle and slammed his shoulder into the frame. The wood barely budged. Smoke drifted from beneath the baseboards, thin at first, but thickening fast. Max coughed again. His voice cracked and panicked. "Dad, I can't breathe." Jake backed up, grabbed a nearby shovel, and swung it hard against the padlock. Nothing. The rusted thing held. iron and spite. Inside, Max began banging on the walls. Jake pulled out his phone. No signal. The tennis court sat just far enough from the main road that cell reception dipped. The nearest house was obscured behind trees. No one would hear him yell. And no fire truck would get there in time. Jake knew he had two options: wait and pray, or act. He sprinted back to his truck. The shed sat behind a flimsy chain-link fence that bordered the whole greenbelt. Jake didn't hesitate. He jumped in the driver's seat, reversed 20 feet, then floored the gas. His front bumper collided with the fence, flattening it. Tires dug into the grass, kicking up dirt as the truck smashed through the shrub line and stopped just feet from the shed. Jake leapt out, pulled the tow chain from the back, and wrapped it around the old block like a noose. Smoke rolled out from the shed's roof now, curling like black fingers into the sky. He jumped back behind the wheel and hit reverse. With a screech of metal, the lock tore off, and the door creaked open. Jake bolted in. The air inside was dense with burning plastic and scorched insulation. His eyes watered instantly. Max was curled up near the back, hacking, his shirt pulled over his nose. A melted extension cord hung from a scorched light fixture, still sparking. Jake grabbed Max and hauled him over his shoulder, stumbling through the doorway just as a beam cracked above them. They rolled into the grass as the roof began to cave in. Max coughed violently, gasping. It was a prank. Karen said there was a surprise. Some kind of model engine inside. Jake pulled him back, eyes wide. She told you that? Max nodded, his face smeared with ash. She said not to tell you. Said it was an HOA reward for good behavior. She had a key. Jake turned toward the smoldering building. The heat radiated like an open oven. Sirens were finally starting to echo in the distance. He laid Max gently in the shade of a tree and tried to steady his breathing. Fire trucks wouldn't reach them for at least 10 minutes. That's when Karen arrived. Her heels crunched across the gravel path, phone in hand, already recording. Well, she said, syrupy and thin. What exactly happened here? Jake stood slowly, fists clenched. You knew he was in there. Karen blinked. Excuse me, you told him to go inside that shed. You said there was something for him, and you locked it behind him. Karen tilted her head. You're not making sense. You should calm down. Jake. Max, still coughing, croaked from behind. She did it. Karen's smile faltered for a breath. Then Travis showed up. Kimmer already rolling. This man, Karen declared, just destroyed HOA property, nearly caused a forest fire, and now he's trying to cover it by blaming others. We'll be filing a full incident report. Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. The smell of burnt rubber and melted plastic still hung thick in the air. His son's face was red from smoke. And yet here stood Karen, immaculate, calm, spinning the story like it was a campaign speech. You want to file something? Jake said, stepping forward. Good. I'll file with the police, and when I do, they'll find out who unlocked that shed and who made sure my son couldn't get out. Karen raised her phone. You're threatening me now. Jake looked her dead in the eye. I'm saving my son. The rest is just cleanup, as firefighters pulled and down the road. Jake scooped Max into his arms and carried him toward the ambulance that had just arrived. The paramedics rushed forward. He didn't turn back, but he heard Karen say one last thing to Travis as the sirens wailed. Delete any footage that shows him opening the door. Now, she didn't know Jake had already started recording the moment he reached the shed, and she didn't know what was coming next. The hospital smelled like bleach and sorrow. Jake sat beside Max's bed, staring at the monitor blinking steady green. His son was lucky. Minor smoke inhalation, a few burns on his arms, but no lasting damage. The nurse said another 10 minutes in there and it would have been a different conversation. Jake hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Max's hand reaching through smoke, calling his name with a voice full of fear. The shed, the fire, the padlock, it looped like a curse in his mind. And Karen's smile, the mask she wore when she said, "Kids will be kids." Jake opened the voice recorder on his phone. He played it again. the audio clip from his drive toward the shed, starting just before he burst through the gate. He had hit record by reflex. Out of habit from years of dealing with angry customers at the shop. Static. Then, "Help, Dad, I can't breathe." He skipped ahead. Karen's voice came next, clear as daylight. "Well, what exactly happened here?" That wasn't the only thing. Jake remembered something else. Max had mentioned Karen used a key. How would she have one? Jake drove back to Oak Hollow the next morning, just after sunrise. The fire department had already cleared the scene, labeling it as electrical mishap in an abandoned horse structure. But Jake had questions. He walked the perimeter, examining the ground around the burnt shed. Behind the bushes, he spotted it, something glinting near the base of a tree. A key, half melted, twisted from heat. But it had the horror logo on it. Jake took photos, picked it up with a rag, and dropped it into his Ziploc bag. Later that day, he visited the horror office. Karen wasn't there. The door was locked. But Travis was inside, sipping coffee and watching security feeds. Jake knocked hard. Travis jumped. His eyes darted to the monitor, then back to Jake. "What do you want?" Jake didn't answer. He pulled out his phone, opened the voice recorder, and hit play. Karen's voice filled the whole way. Travis paled. "You're bluffing," he muttered. Jake, "Lean closer. She asked you to delete the footage. But there's one thing you didn't know. I was recording when I found Max, and I know you saw him go into that shed. I need that footage." Travis shifted. "That footage doesn't exist anymore." Jake nodded. "Then we'll do it the hard way." He walked away, leaving Travis frozen in the doorway. That night, Jake called an old friend, Angela, a local journalist he hadn't spoken to since high school. He told her everything. She didn't believe him at first, until he sent her the recordings. "You have the Hoa president instructing a child to go into a shed that caught fire, and then telling someone to delete evidence." She asked. "I've got more coming," Jake said. "But I need time." Angela promised to sit on the story for 48 hours, long enough, Jake hoped, to bring everything into the light. Back at home, Max was resting on the couch, inhaler nearby, blanket wrapped around him. Jake watched his son sleep and made a silent promise. They weren't going to be the next quiet family to move out in shame. Not like the Thompsons. Not like the Ryans. He'd heard their stories whispered at cookouts and coffee shops. People who pushed back against the horror and then vanished from the neighborhood like ghosts. The next day, Jake returned to the HOA office. This time, Karen was there. She was wearing red. The kind of red that demanded attention. Jake sat across from her, calm and coiled. "I found the key," he said. Karen blinked slowly. "What key?" "The one with the horror logo, burned, left behind near the shed. The one you used to lock my son in." Karen smiled, but her fingers tapped the table too quickly. "That's a very serious accusation." Jake pulled out his phone, not to show her anything, just to let her see the screen light up. "Then take it seriously, because in about 24 hours, you're going to be in the news." Karen stood. "Leave, now." Jake stood too. "You know what's funny?" he said. "You built this neighborhood like a stage play. Perfect lawns, fake smiles, quiet control. But the thing about fires, they don't play by your script." Karen's smile cracked odd as Jake left the office. He didn't notice Travis watching. From the back hallway, phone shaking in his hands, he had a decision to make. Travis wasn't a brave man. He never intended to hurt anyone. When Karen brought him onto the horror board, it felt like a step up from working at the hardware store. She told him he had potential, gave him a title, let him carry around that stupid clipboard. But lately, everything felt wrong, especially that afternoon with the shed. He hadn't known Max was inside. Not at first. Karen told him it was just a scare tactic. "We need to remind Jake who's in charge. A little disruption goes a long way." She made it sound like a prank, but when the shed went up in smoke, Travis realized just how far she was willing to go. And now Jake knew more than he was supposed to. That night, Travis sat in his dark apartment. USTARING at a folder on his desktop. It was labeled routine inspections, but inside were dozens of video files. Most were harmless, but a few weren't. One of them showed Karen leading Max toward the shed. The camera was high, mounted above the tennis court gate, barely catching the figures through the trees, but you could see enough. Max following, Karen unlocking the door. A brief flash of hesitation, then the door closing behind him. Travis hovered his mouse over the delete button. He couldn't do it. Instead, he copied the file onto a thumb drive and left his apartment at 2 a.m. He knew exactly where to go. The next morning, Jake opened his front door and found an envelope taped to the mailbox. No return name. Inside was a USB and a single piece of paper with one sentence scribbled in Sharpie. "This is what she didn't want you to see." Jake plugged it in. As soon as the footage played, he froze. It was grainy, yes, but unmistakable. Karen unlocking the shed, glancing around, waving Max over. Then the door closed. 5 seconds later, she walked off like nothing happened. His chest tightened. This wasn't just carelessness. This was premeditated. And finally, someone besides him and Max knew it. Jake picked up the phone and called Angela, the reporter. "I've got it," he said. By noon, Angela's article was live. The headline didn't pull punches. HOA president accused of endangering child. Video evidence surfaces. Jake didn't have to wait long for the storm. His phone blew up. Calls from neighbors, messages from people he hadn't spoken to in years. Some offered support. Some were terrified. And then, the knock came. Jake opened the door to find Karen, standing with 2 uniformed police officers behind her. She was calm, almost smug. "I'm here to serve you," she said. The officer handed Jake a folded piece of paper, a restraining order. Karen claimed harassment, defamation, and unauthorized surveillance. Jake almost laughed. "She locked my son in a shed," he said, holding up the USB. "You should be talking to her." The officer didn't flinch. "We're reviewing the evidence now. For today, we're just delivering this." Karen tilted her head. "Actions have consequences." Jake watched her walk back to her car. But something was different. Her hands were trembling. She kept glancing over her shoulder. That confidence, it was cracking. Later that evening, Jake stepped outside and found Mrs. Lopez sitting on her porch across the street. Blanket over her knees, thermos in hand. "She's scared now," she said. Jake sat beside her. "Why'd you help me? Most folks just stay quiet." Mrs. Lopez sipped her tea. "When my son was 15, she said softly. Karen tried to have him suspended for parking his bike on the sidewalk, claimed it was a visual nuisance. That was years ago. But I never forgot. I told myself, if she ever went after someone again, I wouldn't stay silent." Jake nodded. "Thank you," she smiled. "She's not invincible. You just had to light a fire." Jake looked up toward the whole office. Lights were still on. Probably Karen pacing, trying to figure out how to put the smoke back in the bottle. But it was too late. Because tomorrow, the rest of the neighborhood would wake up to headlines. The evidence was out. And Karen, the queen of the cul-de-sac, wasn't safe behind her clipboard anymore. She wasn't ready for what came next. And Jake wasn't done fighting. Karen Rollins had ruled Ocala for 7 years. She enforced mailbox heights with measuring tape. She fined people for leaving their trash cans out 15 minutes past collection. She banned chalk drawings on sidewalks, even if they came from toddlers. But now, for the first time, she wasn't the one setting the narrative. Angela's article didn't just go viral in their county. It hit a regional circuit. News anchors picked it up by evening. Jake's name was out there, but so was Max's, along with screenshots from the surveillance video. By sunrise, 3 HOA board members had called an emergency meeting. Karen called it damage control, but others had started calling it something else. A vote of no confidence. Travis didn't show up for the meeting. His seat was left empty. Jake, meanwhile, stayed out of sight, not out of fear, out of strategy. He knew Karen wanted a reaction. She wanted him angry. reckless, emotional. Instead, he focused on gathering more data, and then he remembered the old group text. Months ago, when Jake had first moved in, a neighbor named Lyle had tried to start a community chat to get around the Hoa. Most folks left the group after Karen found out, but Jake still had it in his phone. He sent one message: "If Karens ever come after you, I'm listening, no judgment, total confidentiality." He didn't expect much, maybe 1 or 2 replies. By noon, he had over 40. Some were small, a $200 fine for unapproved Halloween decorations. Others were worse, cameras installed without permission, backyard fences taken down in the night. Even one family who claimed Karen threatened to report them for child neglect after their teen hosted a small birthday party with loud music. Jake compiled it all. He didn't plan to publish it. Not yet. But he knew who he wanted to see it. He waited for her office hours, then walked through the glass doors holding a manila folder. Karen was seated at her desk, head down, pretending to be busy with paperwork. She looked up only when Jake dropped the folder on the table between them. "What is this?" she asked without looking inside. "Community feedback," Jake said. "I figured if you're going to accuse me of harassment, maybe we should both know what that actually looks like." She opened it. As her eyes moved across the pages, her face tightened. One statement caught her eye, a typed paragraph from a former resident who claimed Karen sent a private security patrol to their house at 2 a.m. because they had left a grill uncovered. She closed the folder sharply. "You're trespassing," she said. Jake folded his arms. "I'm not the only one watching you anymore." Her jaw clenched. "You think this makes you the hero?" Jake stepped back toward the door. "I don't care about titles. I care about my kid. And the more people hear what you've done, the more that clipboard of yours starts looking like a weapon." He turned to leave, but Karen's voice followed. "Max went into that shed on his own," she said flatly. "You can spin whatever you want. But I never touched him. That shed wasn't even my responsibility, and I can prove it." Jake paused at the doorway. "That's funny," he said, not turning round, "because the key I found didn't fall out of thin air." He left her sitting there, motionless, that evening. Karen tried her own strategy. She walked the block, smiled at neighbors, handed out flyers claiming the media had twisted the story. She even told one family that Jake doctored the footage. But the look she got in return had changed. Her words didn't land the way they used to. No one smiled back. A few doors didn't even open. And behind one curtain, Travis stood watching. He still had copies of everything. His camera had seen it all. And the guilt was crawling up his spine like a spider in the dark. He opened a new email draft. No name, no sender ID, just the files. The raw ones. And he sent them all to the fire department. Later that night, Jake got a call from Chief Donnelly himself. "We're reopening the investigation," the chief said. "That shed wasn't up to code, and your son's inhaler was found near the back wall. There's reason to believe someone placed it there." Jake gripped the phone tighter. "Placed it?" "Yes," the chief said, like bait. The pieces were falling fast now. Jake wasn't just fighting Karen anymore. He was unearthing a game she'd been playing for years. And soon, everyone would know the rules she'd broken. The next morning, Jake sat on his porch, coffee in hand, watching Max draw a sketchpad. The air felt quieter, still. But underneath that calm, something was moving. Chief Donnelly called again. "We had one of our inspectors take another look at the shed," he said. "Turns out it wasn't just neglected. It had been wired for electricity illegally. Extension cords ran through the wall from the nearby utility panel. It overloaded." Jake leaned forward. "Are you telling me the shed was rigged to catch fire?" "Not exactly," the chief said. "But someone knew it wasn't safe, and they left it powered." Jake tightened his grip on the mug. "Karen knew. She had the key. She told Max to go in. That's what we're looking at next." The chief wasn't just entertaining the theory anymore. He was following it. The department had also received an anonymous package sent directly to the station. It contained the same surveillance video Jake had only this version had timestamps and a second angle. The second angle showed Travis standing nearby with his camera before the fire. That's what changed everything. Jake hung up and stared out across the street. Karen's SUV was missing from the driveway, but her blinds were drawn tight. Max looked up from his sketchpad. Is it over yet? Jake shook his head. Not yet. At the next HOA meeting, chairs were packed to the back wall. More residents showed up than ever before. The room buzzed. With unease, Karen stood at the front, still dressed in red, still wearing her signature pin. But this time, her words sounded forced. Her voice cracked when she greeted the board. Jake stood in the back, arms crossed, saying nothing. Travis entered late. His eyes flicked to Karen, then dropped. Karen cleared her throat. Before we begin, I'd like to address the rumors and misinformation spreading through our community. Murmurs rippled through the room. I've served this HOA for 7 years, she continued, and never once have I acted with malice toward any resident. What happened to young Max was tragic, but it was an accident, one that has nothing to do with our board or its responsibilities. Jake could feel it. The walls closing in on her. She was dancing on the edge. One hand went up. It was Lyle, the neighbor who once had his holiday lights fined. So who wired the shed? Karen. She smiled thinly. That's under investigation. Another hand, who moved the shed off the HOA maintenance plan last year without approval. Karen hesitated. That's not relevant. It is if someone knew it was unsafe, said another voice. Then came the voice from the door. Chief Donnelly. He walked in without asking, a folder under his arm. I think we've got enough relevant questions to talk about. Mrs. Rollins, he said, may I? Karen's face drained of color. The board hesitated. Then the vice president, a woman named Naomi, nodded. Go ahead. Chief Donnelly opened the folder. Surveillance footage shows Max being lured to the shed by a person with a key, and that same person leaving the door locked. The shed was illegally wired and actively drawing power from a neighboring panel. The door was padlocked with an HOA-issued lock. And we now have two witnesses who claim HOA leadership discouraged reporting prior complaints. Karen shifted. I'm not sure what this has to do with. The chief raised his hand. We also have video of Travis Miller near the scene. Watching. Travis, you want to say something now? Eyes turned. Travis stood frozen. Then, slowly, he walked forward. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket and placed it on the table. I have everything, every recording, every conversation she made me film and delete. I didn't know Max was in danger. I swear I didn't. Karen stood. This is ridiculous. That footage is stolen. No. Travis said quietly, it's the truth. The room went silent. Chief Donnelly closed the folder. Karen Rollins, I'd advise you to speak with legal counsel. We'll be issuing a formal subpoena for HOA records related to this incident. Karen didn't move. The silence dragged. Then Naomi said, softly but firmly, effective immediately. I motion to remove Karen Rollins as president of the Oak Hollow Homeowners Association pending criminal investigation. One by one, the board members raised their hands. Even Travis. Karen stared at them all, jaw tight, eyes wide. Her voice finally broke through the silence. You have no idea what you've just done. But she was wrong. They knew exactly what they'd done. And Jake, he wasn't finished. Because there was still one thing no one had figured out yet. Why the fire started exactly when it did. Jake couldn't sleep that night. The meeting had ended with Karen being removed, escorted out without her clipboard or her fake smile. But something still didn't sit right. The evidence was strong. The witnesses were lining up, yet Jake couldn't shake the feeling that Karen had wanted all this to happen, as if the fire, the meeting, even the cameras, were part of something bigger. Max had fallen asleep on the couch again. Curled up next to his inhaler, Jake sat in the garage, listening to the old voice memos and reviewing everything, the shed, the timeline, the call from Mrs. Lopez, and most of all, the power, the illegal extension cord. That's when it hit him. The shed had no power just a few weeks before. Max had tried to explore it earlier that month, but the door had been sealed shut, and the inside was pitch black. No electricity, no activity. Jake pulled up his old inspection photos. He'd taken them the week they moved in, when he'd helped Max collect parts for a science project. The panel box near the tennis courts had been locked back then, but in a new video, the one Travis had turned over, the panel box was open. The power to that shed had been switched on exactly 2 days before the fire. Jake made her call. Angela, the reporter, answered groggily. I know it's late, he said. But what if this wasn't just about punishing Max? What if the fire was part of a bigger setup? Angela perked up. Go on. Karen knew I had surveillance in my garage, that I'd been documenting everything. So why go that far? Why risk a fire? Angela went quiet for a moment, then said, unless she was trying to destroy something else. What was stored in that shed? Jake paused. He hadn't asked. The next morning, Jake returned to the charred remains of the shed with Chief Donnelly's approval. Most of the structure was ash and bent nails, but in one corner, behind the blackened wall studs, the frame had partially collapsed around something metal. It was a filing cabinet. Jake pulled on the warped drawers. One of them popped open. Inside were half-melted folders, most beyond recognition, but one was sealed in a waterproof bag, scorched around the edges, but still intact. Inside, a list of resident addresses, inspection reports, fund records, and something worse. Photos. Dozens of them. Not of trash cans or grass height violations, but of families, couples, teenagers, kids at the park, all dated and logged. The most recent file, labeled Sanders Active Watch. Jake's hands shook. Karen hadn't been managing a neighborhood. She had been running a surveillance operation, monitoring families she thought were a threat to the community's image. Donnelly was stunned when Jake brought the file to the station. We've got enough here to warrant a full criminal investigation, he said. Not just fire code violations. This borders on harassment, maybe stalking. Jake called Angela again. They weren't just HOA files, he said. She kept records on people, patterns, times, places they walked their dogs. Angela didn't waste time. She ran the story the afternoon. It exploded. Parents called the station in panic. Former residents came forward in droves. One woman shared how her autistic son had been followed by horror agents after a minor dispute with Karen. Another said her family's Christmas decorations were vandalized after refusing to pay a mysterious late fine. By nightfall, Jake got another visit, this time, not from Karen, but from someone unexpected. Naomi, the new interim HOA president, stood at his door, files in hand. I thought you should know, she said. Karen withdrew $9,000 in HOA funds the day before the shed caught fire. Jake stared at her. For what? We don't know yet. The transfer was flagged, but it went into a private account, not an HOA vendor. Jake's eyes narrowed. She torched the shed to destroy these records. Max was just the smoke cover. Naomi nodded. And if your son hadn't made it out, no one would have looked. Twice, Jake closed the door behind her, his pulse pounding. Karen hadn't just set a trap. She built a fire, not to scare Jake, but to erase her history and make him the villain. Max had been bait. The flames, the drama, the chaos, all to cover her tracks before disappearing with the cash. But she didn't disappear fast enough. Because Jake wasn't done yet. Karen Rollins didn't answer her door. Jake had knocked once, twice. He wasn't there to confront her, not with fists or fury. He just wanted to look her in the eye, one final time, and say, I know everything now. But the house was dark. No car in the driveway. The neighbor across the street, an older man who trimmed his hedges 3 times a day, poked his head out. She left last night, he said. Late, car full of boxes, didn't wave. Jake nodded. She was running, but not fast enough. By the time Karen made it to the interstate, a warrant had already been signed. The missing HOA funds. Bank records tied the transfer directly to her personal account. Travis's footage, along with the fire inspector's report and Jake's photos, had painted the full picture. Karen wasn't just under investigation. She was wanted. Chief Dunley called it the biggest TOA fraud case we've ever seen. Not because of the money, but because of the obsession, the records, the surveillance, the staged fire. She had turned a neighborhood into her private kingdom and every homeowner into a piece on her board. But now, her board was gone, and Jake had flipped the table. It took just 2 days for authorities to find her. She'd driven 5 hours south, staying at a motel under her sister's name. It was the front desk clerk who recognized her from the news. She was arrested, quietly, no chase, no scene, just handcuffs and silence. When asked about the fire, she refused to speak. When asked why she targeted Max, she said nothing. But Jake didn't need her confession. He stood outside the courthouse the day she was arraigned. Reporters buzzed around the steps. Angela stood nearby with her mic lowered. "She's not getting away with it," she said. Jake nodded. "She almost did." Angela turned to him. "Why didn't you just move? Most families do when they get on the HOAS bad side." Jake looked across the street where Max was waiting, drawing in his sketch pad under a tree. "Because I promised my son I'd protect him. Not just once, every time." Angela didn't ask more. She already had her headline. Weeks passed. The whole board turned over. Naomi led the charge to rewrite the rules. No more private fines without transparency. No more unannounced inspections. And no more Karen-style enforcement teams. The neighborhood slowly healed. Flags reappeared on porches. Kids rode bikes down the street again. Someone even painted a mural on the old whore wall. A phoenix rising from ash. Jake and Max attended the community barbecue that summer. People shook his hand, apologized for staying quiet, thanked him for standing up when no one else would. Even Travis showed up. He kept his distance, but eventually approached Jake near the grill. "I was a coward," he said. Jake took a sip from his soda. "But you turned it around. That's what counts." "I never knew what she was really doing," Travis added. "Not all of it," Jake shrugged. "No one did. That was the point." Travis smiled sadly, then walked away. The weight of his guilt still hung on his shoulders, but Jake knew it would lift. In time. Max ran up with a plate full of ribs. "Guess what?" he grinned. "They're naming the new community garden after Mrs. Lopez." Jake smiled. "She deserves it," she said. "I can help design the fence." "You better make it flameproof," Jake said. Max laughed, mouth full of cornbread. Later that night, Jake stood on the porch, looking out across the neighborhood. The shed was gone, bulldozed and replaced with grass. The burned pieces, the blackened air, the fear, all of it felt distant now. But he still kept the file of evidence, not as a threat, just a reminder that sometimes the quietest neighborhoods had the loudest secrets. And sometimes the person with the clipboard and smile is the most dangerous one on the block. But also, sometimes standing up once can make sure no one else ever has to.